to see 700 of the same mark. Here's again, same sort of thing. This one is kind of interesting. You'll see how many ballots. I don't know exactly how many ballots are in that box, but it's somewhere between 30 and 50. And this polling station had results of more than 900 votes. So in this case, they didn't even bother stuffing the ballots. They just lied on the forms. And so, basically, I mean, they didn't figure that anyone was really going to look. So this was an amazing thing to see. Again, the brazenness and/or the amateurish nature of this fraud was that, heck, we won't even waste our time. We'll just go ahead and say that there were 900 votes for a certain candidate in that polling station. This is another one. This one I liked a lot. It's kind of hard to see. But the perforation is actually here between the green and the white. So you have all these blank pads, these empty pads of ballots that are cut below the green, where in fact the perforation is here. And then the ballots themselves that were in that box had the green portion attached to the ballot. So they took stubs from one polling place and put it in the box with ballots from another. So again, an example of 100% fraud in that polling place. Here again, this one, they didn't even bother making a check mark. They just took a marker, and ballots are not supposed to be marked in marker. They were supposed to be marked in blue or black pen, but ballots were marked in marker. If you're doing hundreds and thousands of ballots, marker is a lot easier. So a lot of the fraudulent ballots, or one of the great indicators of fraud that we had, was that the ballots themselves were marked with blue marker. Continuing with our timeline, on the 12th of October, Commissioner Baraksai resigned, citing foreign influence in the process and un-Islamic decision-making. 2 days later, President Karzai said, "You can't resign." So back he went. But he was not a very strong participant in anything after that point. This was the audit results meeting on 8 October. These are some of my international technical advisor colleagues, and these pieces of paper that they're looking at are reports from the audits on each of those polling places. And we sort of actually talked about this at this moment. We were sitting around that table, and we talked about the history of this moment. It was those pieces of paper that we were looking at when we knew that there was enough fraud that we had proven that there was going to be a second round. This was the moment at which we knew that the ECC was going to order enough ballots to be invalidated that they would force a second round of elections. So it was kind of amazing for us, and it felt like an important moment, and we knew it at the time, which is pretty interesting. On the 18th of October, all the results were issued, and the ECC annulled 1.319 million ballots out of 5.662 million ballots, or 23.2% of the total. And again, this was all based on the sampling and the extrapolated formulas that they came up with. An estimated just a little under 1 million of those annulled votes were for Karzai, so 75.4% of the annulled total was for President Karzai. So there was a big fight over how the ECC took the formulas, how the IEC took the ECC's formula. But the bottom line was that President Karzai did get below 50%, and therefore a runoff election was required at that point. On the 20th of October, President Karzai accepted the decision of the ECC. Between the 18th and the 20th, there was some dispute over whether or not he was going to accept the ECC's decision. He did that, stating that he didn't believe that the process had been fair and or that the ECC had been the subject of foreign influence, and that the process itself should not be trusted, but for the good of the nation, he was going to accept the runoff election. Was also heavy lobbying by the Western countries, specifically Secretary of State Clinton and Senator John Kerry from Massachusetts came to see Mr. Karzai, and it was after those meetings that he accepted the runoff for the good of the country. The election was subsequently scheduled for the 7th of November. On the 20th of October, there was a suicide attack on a UN guest house, and 8 people were killed, including 5 international election workers. Fortunately, I didn't know any of the people who were killed, but I did know many people who lived in that guest house. And so that was a traumatic event for all of us. It was a particularly difficult day, and in fact, we were not allowed to go outside for 3 days after that. We did in fact get machine gun escort to the office so we could get some files and come back home and work on them there. But we were stuck inside for several days after that event, and it was pretty hard, really, because I think that was the first time for a lot of us, for me certainly, that I really thought about the fact that someone wanted me dead, and that, anyone working on the election was considered a fair target, and that anyone working on the election was in fact threatened. So I don't know whether I just didn't think about it before, but that was a moment that kind of changed a lot for all of us. On the 1st of November, Dr. Abdullah withdrew from the race. He had made a number of demands of the IEC, specifically that the chairman and a couple of the commissioners should be replaced due to the fact that they were considered partial to candidate Karzai. And, of course, that did not happen. So Dr. Abdullah withdrew from the race on the 1st of November. And that kind of left a little bit of an uncertain period. No one was quite sure what to do. The election law is not clear on what happens when a candidate pulls out. Most international legal experts stated that the runoff should continue and that there should be an election even though there was only one candidate. However, the IEC made the decision that there should be no election and that Karzai was reelected, and they gave that statement on the 2nd of November. Most of us did not agree with that decision. However, as a practical matter, we didn't want a whole new round of election, seeing the cost in human life, expense, and the fact that, to be entirely honest, we wanted to go home at that point. And so the fact that there was to be no runoff was something that as I said, didn't agree with, but we felt was something that we were pleased with. And it was a great sigh of relief among all of us that we would be not having to deal with the second round. Okay, outlook for the future. Again, I feel that I'm not overly hopeful, and that's kind of a shame. But there are supposed to be parliamentary elections in the spring of this year. Obviously, that's just not going to happen. We don't know. The date that's currently being discussed is the end of May, but I would be very, very surprised if that were the case. I don't think that we're in any way ready to see an election in the end of May, and there are some other troubling signs, specifically that Mr. Karzai has issued directives changing the structure and the nature of the ECC, in some ways a retaliatory action against the organization that he views as having cost him the first round win. He changed the law unilaterally and said that of the 5 commissioners, 3 should be Afghans and 2 can be Western. Initially, he said that all 5 would be Afghan, but the Special Representative, the Secretary General, insisted that at least 2 remain Afghans. So that's all currently in discussion and dispute. Even worse, though, some of the staff members that we left in Afghanistan that were planning on working for the ECC in 2010 are unlikely to be kept on. And Mr. Karzai has said that anyone who worked for the ECC in 2009 would not be allowed to work for the ECC in 2010. And that's a terrible sign. It's really, really difficult, particularly in the sense of capacity building. We did a lot of work with people who learned a great deal, and we're extremely committed to a process, and we're looking forward to continuing it through. And for stability and long-term growth of democracy, it's not a good idea to consistently replace institutions that are supposed to be implementing law and trying to move forward. So, as I said, it sends a powerful message to future ECC workers that if you don't do what you're told, then you'll be replaced as well. And it, in my view at least, dims the hope for real progress towards elections in the future. I will just mention that after the cancellation of the election on the 7th of November, second round election, the ECC continued processing its complaints and finished its work on the 9th of December. So officially the ECC disbanded on the 9th of September. Okay. Having been as negative as I've just been, I thought I'd end with just a few sort of nicer images of Afghanistan. This is the roof of the ECC, and we really, when things were tough, I particularly like to go to the roof and look, and this was at the very end of October. We got a very large snowfall in the mountains, and it was just beautiful to see, and I found it quite humbling to kind of stand there on the roof and look at the mountains and think about everything that we were doing and everything that was happening. And whenever there was a bombing or anything, we would go to the roof and sort of watch the smoke and think about things like that. And it was, at least for me, a very reflective place, but a good one, not a bad one. And this really was my favorite part of where we were located. This is out the back window of my office. There was a family family of squatters that lived in a brick house that was there in a little sort of